The veil was a cage of spun silk, trapping the scent of wilting lilies and her own fear. Ilara stood in the cold antechamber of the cathedral, a porcelain doll arranged for display, her hands clammy inside her satin gloves. Outside, the organ music swelled, a triumphant sound that felt like a mockery. It was the sound of her life ending, or perhaps the life she never truly had being formally signed away. Her father, Baron Vance, stood beside her, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. He had not looked at her, not really, since the arrangement was made. He looked at the sigil on the Duke of Blackwood's letter, at the numbers on the settlement papers, at the reflection of his own restored fortunes in the polished cathedral floors. He saw a solution, not a daughter. "You will remember your duty, Ilara," he said, his voice low and hard, not meant for comfort but for command. "The Duke is a man of particular tastes. He values propriety above all else. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not offer an opinion. Your purpose is to be a duchess, nothing more." Ilara's breath hitched. A duchess. The word was a lead weight in her stomach. She was to be the wife of Duke Alistair, a man spoken of in whispers, a spectre of power and wealth who rarely graced London society. They said he was cold, that his heart was a barren landscape left behind by some long-ago tragedy. They said he was ruthless in his dealings, that his eyes missed nothing and forgave less. She had never met him. She had never even seen a portrait. Her family's impending ruin had been the catalyst. Her father's gambling debts had piled up like winter snow, silent and suffocating. The Duke's offer had been a sudden thaw, a flood of gold that would wash away their disgrace. The price was her. Ilara, the quiet one, the elder daughter who spent her time with books and charcoal sketches, the one who had been on the shelf so long she was gathering dust. She was 26, a veritable spinster in a world where girls were married off at 17. Her younger sister, Annabel, had wept when the news was announced, not for Ilara's fate, but for her own lost opportunity. Annabel was the family beauty, the one with the golden curls and laughter like wind chimes, the one who had always been destined for a brilliant match. But the Duke's offer had been specific, the contract ironclad. It was for the Baron's eldest daughter, a strange, impersonal detail that had sealed her fate. A chill snaked up her spine, a feeling she had grown accustomed to over the past few weeks. It was the chill of resignation. She had fought at first. She had pleaded with her mother, who had simply wrung her hands and spoken of their duty to the family name. She had tried to reason with her father, who had looked at her as if she were a horse refusing a bridle. There was no escape. This was her purpose, a living sacrifice on the altar of her family's preservation. The music outside changed, a signal. Her father's hand clamped around her arm, his grip possessive and ungentle. "It is time," he said. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird beating against the bars of her corset. Each step from the antechamber into the blinding light of the nave felt like a step toward the gallows. 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch her, their gazes of physical weight. She saw the faces of London's elite, a sea of polite curiosity and veiled pity. They all knew the Vance's circumstances. They all knew this was a transaction, not a romance. She kept her eyes fixed on the altar at the far end of the impossibly long aisle. A figure stood there, his back to her, silhouetted against the stained glass window. The Duke of Blackwood. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a perfectly tailored coat of black wool. He did not turn. Even from this distance, he radiated an aura of absolute stillness, of unnerving control. Her father led her forward, the slow, measured pace of the bridal march feeling like a funeral dirge. The air grew thick, heavy with incense and the unspoken judgments of the crowd. With every step, the Duke's silhouette became clearer, sharper. He was a man carved from granite, all hard lines and imposing presence. She could feel his coldness from across the cathedral. When they finally reached the altar, her father placed her hand into the officiants and stepped away, his duty done. Elara was left standing beside the Duke, close enough now to see the severe line of his jaw, the dark, immaculately styled hair. He still had not looked at her. His gaze was fixed on the bishop, his expression unreadable. The bishop cleared his throat, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We are gathered here today." Elara risked a glance at the man beside her. His profile was stark, handsome in a severe, intimidating way. There was no softness in him. His stillness was not calm, it was the coiled tension of a predator. A shiver of pure, undiluted fear went through her. This was the man who would own her, body and soul. The bishop's voice droned on, a meaningless flow of words about union and devotion. Elara felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play in which she had been miscast. This could not be her life. This cold, terrifying stranger could not be her husband. Then, the moment came. The bishop turned to the Duke. "Do you, Alistair, Duke of Blackwood, take this woman?" The Duke finally moved. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, and his eyes met hers for the first time. They were the color of a winter storm, a piercing grey that seemed to see right through the silk veil, through the layers of her gown, and into the trembling heart of her. There was no warmth in them, no welcome. There was only a flash of something she could not name, shock perhaps, or disbelief. It was there and gone in an instant, replaced by an expression of glacial contempt. His gaze swept over her, a dismissive, insulting appraisal from head to toe. A low murmur rippled through the guests. The air crackled with sudden, sharp tension. The bishop faltered, his words dying in his throat. The Duke's lip curled in a faint, cruel sneer. He did not address the bishop. He did not address her. He looked past her, his gaze finding the master of his household staff standing near the entrance. His voice, when it came, was not a shout, but it cut through the silence of the cathedral with the sharp, clean finality of breaking glass. It was cold, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Take her away," the Duke said. The words hung in the air, vibrating with a terrible power. A collective gasp rose from the pews. Elara's blood ran cold. The world tilted on its axis, the faces in the crowd blurring into a watercolor wash of horror and fascination. Her father's face was a mottled canvas of fury and disbelief. Her mother looked as though she might faint. Take her away, like a piece of furniture wrongly delivered, like a stray dog that had wandered into the house. The Duke turned his back on her completely, facing the altar as if she had already vanished. The dismissal was absolute, the humiliation public and complete. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence was a living thing, suffocating her. Elara felt the heat of 1,000 eyes on her, burning through her veil. She could feel their pity, their morbid curiosity, their whispered judgments. Her carefully constructed composure threatened to shatter. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she would not let them fall. She would not give him, or this heartless crowd, the satisfaction. Her hands, hidden in her gloves, clenched into fists. A strange, cold calm settled over her. The fear was gone, burned away by the white-hot flame of indignation. He had made his pronouncement. Now she would make hers. Without waiting for his man to approach, without waiting for her sputtering father to intervene, Elara turned. She did it slowly, with a grace she did not feel, her spine as straight as a steel rod. She did not run, she did not weep. She held her head high, the ridiculous veil now a banner of her defiance. She began to walk, back up the aisle, Each step was a deliberate act of will, a silent rebuttal to his command. She could hear the frantic whispers erupting behind her, a wildfire of scandal spreading through the pews. She did not look at anyone. She focused on the great oak doors at the end of the aisle, the promise of escape. She walked out of the cathedral and into the pale afternoon light, leaving the ruins of her life and the man who had destroyed it behind her. The heavy door boomed shut, sealing her out. And for the first time that day, she could finally breathe. The ride home was a silent tableau of misery. Her mother sobbed into a lace handkerchief. Her father's face was a thundercloud of rage. And Annabel stared out the window, her expression a mixture of horror and a strange, secret relief. Elara sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, feeling nothing. A hollow space had opened up inside her chest, a void where hope and fear had once resided. When they reached the house, the storm broke. "How could you?" her father roared, his voice shaking the crystal glasses in the drawing room. "What did you do? What did you say to him?" "I did nothing," Elara said, her own voice sounding distant and thin. "I never spoke to him." "You must have done something to offend him," her mother wailed. "Your posture, your expression." "I told you to look demure." "She has ruined us," her father declared, pacing the rug like a caged animal. "Utterly and completely ruined. The scandal will be the talk of the ton by nightfall. No one will receive us. Our credit is destroyed. We are finished." Elara looked at their frantic, selfish faces and felt a profound, weary detachment. They were not concerned for her, for the public shaming she had endured. They were concerned for their name, their finances, their social standing. She had failed in her one purpose, and they could not forgive her for it. She turned and walked out of the room, their accusations following her up the stairs. In the sanctuary of her bedroom, she peeled off the satin gloves and the suffocating wedding gown. She stood before the mirror in her simple chemise, looking at the pale, solemn woman who stared back. She saw not a ruined spinster, but a survivor. The cage had been opened. The sacrifice had been rejected. In a strange, terrifying way, she was free. That night, sleep would not come. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the city quieting. The words echoed in her mind. Take her away. What had he seen when he looked at her? What had provoked such a brutal, public rejection? It made no sense. The marriage had been his proposition, the terms his own. The next morning, the world had changed. The first delivery was a small, unmarked box left on the doorstep. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single, perfect gardenia and a note. The handwriting was masculine and severe. It contained only 3 words. My deepest apologies. There was no signature. Elara stared at it, her heart giving a confused flutter. It could not be from the Duke. It was impossible. A man who would humiliate her so thoroughly would not be capable of such a gesture. She dismissed it as a cruel prank. But then the whispers began to change. They arrived with the morning papers and the milk delivery, spreading from servant to servant, from house to house. The story of the disastrous wedding was on everyone's lips. But now there was a new, shocking addendum. Her maid, Clara, brought the news with her morning tea, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "My lady," she whispered, they are saying the Duke made a mistake." Elara looked up from her untouched cup. "A mistake?" "They say he did not know who you were. They say he was expecting someone else." This was even more absurd than the note. Expecting whom? But Clara had no answer. The rumors were a tangled mess of speculation. By midday, however, the story began to solidify, passed along by footmen and ladies' maids who had overheard conversations in the grand houses of Mayfair. Lord Ashworth, a known confidant of the Duke, had apparently spent the previous evening in a state of profound intoxication at his club, lamenting his friend's catastrophic error. The tale he told was so outlandish, so bizarre, that it had to be true. The Duke of Blackwood, the story went, had been in love for years, not with a society belle, but with an artist, a reclusive, mysterious painter known only by the initials E.V. He had been collecting her works for half a decade, captivated by the emotion and soul in her landscapes. He had corresponded with her through her gallery, but she had always guarded her identity fiercely. When the Duke had approached Baron Vance, it was with a very specific purpose. He had, through his own inquiries, come to believe that the mysterious E.V. was none other than the Baron's talented, beautiful daughter, the one spoken of for her charm and grace, Lady Annabel Vance. The contract, however, had been drawn up by solicitors. It had followed legal tradition, specifying the Baron's eldest daughter. Alistair, blinded by his romantic assumption and his disdain for society's trivialities, had never bothered to clarify the name. He assumed the eldest was the celebrated one. He had never seen either sister. When Eleanor had walked down that aisle, he had not seen the woman whose soul he believed he knew through her art. He had seen a stranger. In his mind, it was a bait-and-switch, a desperate family trying to palm off their plain, older daughter on him. His cold fury, his public rejection, had been born of a broken heart and a sense of profound betrayal. Eleanor sat by her window, the city's gossip laid bare before her. It was fantastical. It was impossible. And yet, it explained everything. The flash of shock in his eyes, the immediate, cold contempt. He had been looking for Annabel. But the most impossible part of the story was the detail that even the most avid gossips had missed. The truth that only she knew. The mysterious artist, E.V. Eleanor Vance. She was E.V. The charcoal sketches, the small watercolors she sold through a discreet dealer in a less fashionable part of town, they were her only secret, her only solace. It was a small income that she had been saving for years, a tiny seed of hope for a future where she might one day be independent. She had never imagined anyone of note saw them, let alone the formidable Duke of Blackwood. He had rejected her, believing she was not the woman he loved, when in fact she was. The irony was so bitter, so profound, it stole her breath. He had humiliated the very person he had sought. A sharp, hysterical laugh escaped her lips. She pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle the sound. All this time she had been a ghost in her own home, overlooked and undervalued, while a powerful, unknown man had been falling in love with the most secret part of her. The world had not just tilted, it had inverted itself. She was not the rejected spinster. She was the sought-after artist. The Duke was not a cold-hearted monster. He was a fool. A romantic, impulsive, and utterly catastrophic fool. The power dynamic had shifted. Yesterday, she had been a pawn in her family's desperate game, a commodity to be sold. Today, she held a truth that could ruin the Duke of Blackwood far more completely than he had ruined her. He had not just broken a marriage contract, he had made a public spectacle of his own ignorance. He had lost face, and in their world, face was everything. The afternoon brought a visitor, not to her, but to her father. The Duke's carriage, a severe black coach emblazoned with a silver wolf's head, was an audacious sight at their front door. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor watched from her window as the Duke himself stepped out. He was dressed in black, his face pale and grim. He strode to the door with a sense of purpose that made her stomach clench.
He was here to deal with the fallout,
to manage the contract, to pay whatever price was required to make the problem of the Vance family disappear. She heard her father's raised voice from the study below, then the Duke's, lower and more controlled, a deep rumble of authority. The argument was short. The study door opened and closed. A few minutes later, the Duke emerged from the house and was driven away. Her father summoned her. She found him in his study, a letter with a broken ducal seal on the desk before him. He looked pale, shaken. "He has settled the contract," her father said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "He has paid double the agreed-upon settlement. On one condition." Elara waited, her heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. "He demands a private audience. With you." The request was a spark in the hollow space inside her. He was not just paying them off. He wanted to see her, to explain, to apologize. She did not know what she wanted from him, but a sliver of curiosity, sharp and dangerous, cut through her numbness. "He says he will call upon you tomorrow afternoon, at 3, her father finished, looking at her with a new, calculating expression. The fury was gone, replaced by a greedy sort of hope. He saw a second chance, an opportunity to salvage something from the wreckage. "I will not be here," Elara said, the words surprising even herself. Her father stared. "What do you mean, you will not be here? This is the Duke of Blackwood. You will do as you are told." "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The ground beneath her feet felt solid for the first time in her life. "I do not think I will." She was no longer his pawn to be moved about the board. The Duke had sought E.V., the artist. Let him find her. She spent the rest of the day packing a small valise. She took her sketchbooks, her charcoals, and the small pouch of money she had saved. She wrote a short, simple note for Clara, her loyal maid, instructing her to deliver a message to the Duke's residence the following afternoon. As dusk fell over the city, Elara slipped out the back of the house, a simple grey cloak covering her dress. She was not running away. She was walking towards something, toward herself. The next day, at precisely 3 o'clock, the Duke of Blackwood was shown into the Vances' drawing room. He found it empty. Baron Vance entered, wringing his hands, stammering about his daughter's sudden illness. The Duke's grey eyes narrowed, his expression turning to stone. He knew he was being lied to. At that exact moment, a messenger delivered a note to his London residence. A footman, recognizing the urgency, had it rushed to the Vance house. The Duke broke the seal and read the message, his composure finally cracking. The note was not from Elara. It was from the proprietor of the modest gallery where she sold her work. It stated simply that the artist E.V. had agreed to a private viewing of her latest pieces. An address was provided, the gallery itself. The viewing was for him alone, and it was now. Elara stood in the quiet, sun-dusted gallery, surrounded by her own creations. The proprietor, a kind man who had always respected her privacy, had set up the room as she asked, and then discreetly retired to his office. She was alone with her landscapes, the stormy seascapes, the misty mornings over the moors, the quiet, intimate studies of light falling through trees. They were pieces of her soul, made tangible in paint and charcoal. She wore a simple dark blue day dress, no veil, no gloves. Her hair was pulled back simply. She felt more herself in this room than she ever had in her father's house. She heard the carriage pull up outside, the sound of the door opening, the bell tinkling softly. Heavy, determined footsteps crossed the threshold. He stopped just inside the doorway. The Duke of Blackwood looked different here, away from the grandeur of the cathedral. He seemed larger, more solid, and profoundly out of place. His eyes, those stormy grey eyes, scanned the room, taking in the paintings with a raw hunger that made her breath catch. He saw them. He truly saw them. Then his gaze fell on her. For a long moment, he just stared. The cogs were turning behind his eyes, connecting the impossible dots. He looked from her face, to the paintings on the wall, and back again. The signature on the corner of the nearest canvas was small but clear. E.V. "It's you," he breathed, the words full of dawning, horrified wonder. "All this time, it was you." Elara inclined her head slightly. "Duke?" He took a step forward, then another, his movements hesitant, uncertain. All the cold arrogance she had seen at the altar was gone. In its place was a man stripped bare, his vulnerability a raw, open wound. I have no words," he stammered, running a hand through his dark hair. "There is no apology sufficient for what I did. For the public. For the humiliation." "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice even. She needed to hear it from him. He stopped before a painting of a lone, wind-swept tree on a cliff edge. It was one of her favorites, a study in resilience and solitude. His hand hovered near the canvas, as if he longed to touch it. "Because I am a fool," he said, his voice rough with self-loathing. "I have spent 5 years collecting your work. I thought I knew the person who created these. I imagined a woman of spirit, of quiet strength, of passion. When the marriage was proposed, I made inquiries. All I heard of the Vances was praise for the younger daughter, Annabel. Her beauty, her charm. I made an arrogant, inexcusable assumption that she must be the artist." He turned to face her, his eyes pleading. "When I saw you at the altar, I did not see the woman I had imagined. I saw a stranger. And I thought your father was cheating me, trying to force his other daughter on me for the title and the money. My pride, my damned, wounded pride, it took over. I felt betrayed by the world, by your family, by the woman I thought I loved. And I acted like a monster." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and ugly. He was not making excuses. He was laying his own idiocy at her feet. "You fell in love with a fantasy," Elara said softly. "A person you created in your mind from a few brushstrokes." "No," he said, shaking his head fiercely. "I fell in love with this." He gestured to the paintings around them. "With the truth in them. The honesty. The solitude. I recognized it, because I felt it myself. My life, since my parents died, it has been a duty, a performance. Cold and empty. Your art was the only thing that felt real to me." He took another step closer, his hands clenched at his sides. "The last 2 days have been a living hell. First, realizing my mistake, then realizing the magnitude of it. I have shamed the one person in this world I truly admire. I have behaved without honor. I have lost the respect of my peers, my staff, and myself." She saw it then, the deep, aching loneliness that mirrored her own. He was trapped in a gilded cage, just as she had been trapped in a threadbare one. His coldness was not cruelty, it was armor. Armor that his own foolish heart had shattered. "What do you want from me, Duke?" she asked. "Alistair," he corrected her, his voice cracking slightly. "My name is Alistair. And I want nothing I am entitled to ask for. I came here only to tell you the truth, and to say that I will spend the rest of my life attempting to atone for the insult I gave you. Whatever you need, whatever you desire, it is yours. If you wish to be free of your family, I will arrange it. A house, an income, a new life anywhere you choose. If you wish to see me ruined, I will not stand in your way. I have already lost everything that matters." He believed it. He believed he had lost her. He was offering her freedom, not as a transaction, but as penance. Ilara looked at this powerful, broken man, and she did not feel triumph. She felt a strange, stirring empathy. He had hurt her, yes, terribly. But the wound had been inflicted by a man who was flailing in the dark, not by a calculating villain. "My freedom is not yours to give," she said quietly. "I have already taken it." His face fell, his last hope extinguished. He thought she was dismissing him forever. "I have been EV in secret for years," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Painting in a cold attic room, hiding my work from a family who would have called it an unladylike waste of time. You have, in your own catastrophic way, brought my truth into the light." She walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "You did not humiliate Lady Elara Vance, the spinster. You embarrassed the Duke of Blackwood, and you introduced London to E.V. The scandal has made my name, my real name, more famous than a royal commission ever could. The gallery has been fielding offers all morning." A flicker of understanding dawned in his eyes. "The humiliation will fade, Duke," she said, "but the art will remain. What you did was unforgivable, but what you saw, what you admired, that was real, and I will not allow your foolishness to tarnish it." She had a choice. She could walk away, embracing her newfound fame and independence. She could leave him to his regret, or she could offer a different path, a beginning born from the ashes of a disastrous ending. "If you wish to atone," she said, her gaze steady and challenging, "you will not do it with money or houses. You will do it with honesty. Beginning now." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fragile hope. "Anything," he whispered. "Then let us start again," Elara said. "My name is Elara. I am a painter. And you are—" A slow, sad smile touched his lips for the first time. It transformed his severe face, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the ducal armor. "I am Alistair," he said, his voice husky. "A fool who is very pleased to make your acquaintance." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. It was a choice she made for herself, on her own terms. The power was hers now, and she intended to use it wisely. The next 6 months were a quiet courtship unlike any society had ever seen. There were no grand balls, no chaperoned calls in stuffy drawing rooms. Instead, Alistair came to the gallery. He came to the small studio she rented with the first proceeds of her newfound fame. He would sit for hours, silent and watchful, as she painted. He did not speak of love or marriage. He spoke of light and shadow, of color and composition. He learned the language of her soul. He brought her rare pigments from his travels, old books on technique, and thermoses of hot tea on cold afternoons. He brought her his quiet, unwavering presence. He also used his influence, not to repair his own reputation, but to build hers. He sponsored a public exhibition of her work at the Royal Academy. On the opening night, the cream of London society came, drawn by the lingering scent of scandal. They entered whispering about the jilted bride and the foolish duke. They left talking about the brilliant artist, E. Vance. Alistair stood at the back of the room that night, watching her. He saw her surrounded by admirers, her face glowing with a confidence and joy he had never seen. He had not tried to possess her art, he had given it a platform. He had not tried to hide his mistake, he had turned it into her triumph. It was the most profound apology he could have offered. As the crowd thinned, he approached her. She stood before the painting of the lone tree on the cliff. "You are magnificent," he said, his voice low and full of an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I am myself," she replied with a small smile. Thank you for helping me introduce her to the world. Ilara, he began, his voice hesitant. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I must. I have fallen in love with you. Not the fantasy, not the artist, but you. The woman who talks to her brushes, who gets charcoal on her nose, who is stronger and more graceful than anyone I have ever known. I am asking if you would consider giving the fool who met you at the altar a second chance to be the man who stands beside you now. He did not offer a title or a fortune. He offered himself, his flawed, repentant, and utterly devoted self. Ilara looked at him, at the hope and fear warring in his beautiful, stormy eyes. The memory of the cathedral was a faint scar, no longer a gaping wound. It was part of their story, the terrible, ridiculous beginning that had led them here. The man at the altar was a stranger, she said softly. I have come to know the man who sits in my studio, and I find he is someone I would like to know better. His breath hitched. Is that a yes? It is a beginning, Alistair, she said, and for the first time she reached out and took his hand. Another one. Their second wedding was nothing like the first. It took place not in a grand cathedral, but in the garden of his country estate, a place he had shown her was filled with unruly, beautiful wildflowers. The guests were few, only Clara, the gallery owner, and his friend Lord Ashworth. Ilara wore a simple blue dress, the colour of a twilight sky. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. She walked toward him on a path of scattered petals, her head held high, not in defiance, but in joy. When she reached him, Alistair took both of her hands. His eyes, once the colour of a winter storm, were now the soft grey of a morning mist, warm and full of light. He did not wait for the officiant. I, Alistair, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Take you, Ilara, the only woman I have ever seen, the only one I will ever see. I promise to honour your strength, to champion your art, and to spend the rest of my days being worthy of this beginning. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of profound happiness. She had walked out of a church a ruined woman, and had, by her own will, walked back into a life of love. It was never too late to begin again. True freedom was a choice, and she had chosen this. She had chosen him. The cold, empty halls of Blackwood Manor were soon filled with the scent of turpentine and the sound of laughter. Its walls covered not in the portraits of stern ancestors, but in vibrant landscapes, each one a testament to the fact that love could be patient, it could be foolish, but in the end, it could be true.